Good morning from Ellerslie. I'm Mel, and our hope for today is from 1 Corinthians chapter 15. I grew up in a rural environment. My parents had moved west and homesteaded and worked tooth and nail to carve a life out of nothing from nature. It was hard work, and hard work was what was expected of me. Nothing happens without hard work. I knew that. But it became like a hammer over my head all the time. At the same time, culture was changing rapidly, and it was the peak of the hippie years. The free-flowing, let it happen, back to nature movement was pushing in, and some of us are old enough to remember the line, just doing what comes naturally. There was a certain appeal to it, but I had seen how naturally worked. And what happens when you let nature take its course. Nature is a hard taskmaster. I was reminded of that again last week as we got closer to nature on a bit of a getaway. We were walking on a trail beside a lake and we saw an osprey circling in the sky. We knew he was fishing. Sure enough, as we watched, he went into a dive, hit the water at full force, and didn't get it. We kept watching, and after the third dive, out he came with a fish in his talons. And I thought, poor fish, just cruising along, enjoying the day. Boom, a victim of nature. We watched that osprey rise up with his fish, and suddenly there was this other flashing streak coming from the left, and out of nowhere appeared this eagle. Like a heat-seeking missile, swooped in underneath the osprey, knocked that fish out of his talons. And I thought, poor osprey, another victim of nature. And the next morning, we were canoeing quietly along the edge of the lake, and there on a branch close to the top of a tall, dead tree hanging over the water was a proud-looking bald eagle, probably waiting for another fishing osprey. And suddenly, there's this flashing streak just above us, and a huge, massive golden eagle screamed in, and like a heat-seeking missile aimed right for that one branch on which the bald eagle was perched, and bam, knocked him off his perch and sat there like the new king of the castle. And I thought, poor bald eagle, a victim of nature. Folks, nature, the natural course, the course that feels right, can easily be a very, very hard taskmaster. And I thought again of one of my favorite verses in all of God's Word, a verse that for a significant period of my life I claimed as my own theme verse that I gave myself to seeking to live into, a verse that freed me from needing to prove myself through hard work, but also freed me from the other ditch of just letting nature take its course. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 10, and it's the statement that the Apostle Paul claimed as his own testimony statement. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. What's with the but? Well, if you look back one verse and preceding that, you'll realize that Paul is being compared to the other apostles, the real apostles, and there was no way he fit in. He didn't walk with Jesus when he was on earth. He actually worked against the Jesus movement after Jesus died and rose again. And then God, in his grace, chose Paul and called him to be a leading apostle. You know, when we read that statement, by the grace of God, I am what I am, it's easy to think that Paul is saying, God made me this way, and so I just have to accept it, and so do you. No, Paul is not talking about nature. He says, I am the least of all of the apostles. I don't deserve this, but God in his grace chose me and has given me this calling. You see, nature tends to devastate. By nature, things deteriorate, but God's grace elevates I am not here because I earned it, because I deserved it. I am not here because I am gifted for it. Those may all be true, but if those are what I focus on, if what I want other people to see, if those are what I depend on, they will all lead to having to continue to prove myself, to defend myself, to feel like a failure and beat up on myself, or live in fear that I'll be busted as a phony. The gospel, the good news, is that God, because of and through His grace in Jesus, has elevated me, has lifted me, and given me a secure status. So what do? Do I just let it flow? Just relax? No. By the grace of God, I am what I am, and His grace to me was not without effect. In fact, I worked harder than all of them. Grace elevates, but grace also expects. Paul works, he works hard, but it's working with a whole different motivation. It's working out of thankfulness that I don't have to prove myself, that I have been given what I don't deserve, that I don't have to look around and get frustrated because God has not given me what the next guy has. Whenever I got weary, whenever I get frustrated, whenever I try to force something, I look into my heart and say, am I working to prove something about myself? Am I working to get approval about myself? Or am I working out of a heart of thankfulness for God's amazing grace? And when I do that, I discover that grace not only elevates, grace not only expects, grace actually empowers. By the grace of God, I am what I am, and His grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them, yet not I, but God's grace that was with me. So are you living by the demands of nature, or are you living in the rhythms of grace? Grace elevates, grace expects, grace empowers. That's what I call hope for today.